It might also mean sports teams. You know, if you have an international sports team, that belongs in excitement. In terms of education, excitement is higher education. How many people are graduating with university degrees? Because that's not just normal. Lower education belongs to harmony, but university education is exciting. In terms of health, it would be new medical procedures. The word new belongs to exciting. When things become not so new, they shift towards harmony, you see? So any new ways of helping people with their health would belong to excitement. In terms of security, if there's, I don't know, some a new military base or a new way of protecting people, that would also belong to excitement. You know, investment in ways of increasing security. Or new systems of controlling criminality, I don't know. Okay, so have you found one in excitement? One statistic.
I have something that has to do with education.
Okay.
Just compared to the average for the population. Exact number. Okay. For the population age 18 years and above with post-basic education, this means people who access to university, have access to university, more than basic education. So for the basic region, it's 34.64%.
Yeah.
And for the state is 32.03%.
Okay. Okay. So the basin area is not very different from the whole of the province. Okay. Now, does this belong to harmony, to discipline, or to excitement? So we're talking about university education. So this is not necessary for society to function at a normal rate. This is sort of exciting for the society. This is how society shows off with respect to other societies. We have all this university education. Good. Okay, so this belongs to excitement.
But higher degree studies, they don't help society to work better?
They do, but not directly, you know, not in a basic way. They can indirectly. For example, the project that we're doing is hopefully going to help society to function better. But it's not considered to be, especially since it's only 34%, it's not normal for everyone to get university education. It is more and more in the United States because high school education is not very good. So university becomes high school education. So, but it is something, it's an achievement to go to university. It's not something that is normal. And most people in the society do not need a university education to get a job, to have a family, to get married, to reproduce, to just be normal people.
And also in some countries like United States, it's so expensive, no?
Yeah. Well, that's a separate issue.
Yes.
How the system works. Yeah. So, and it's very good that in Mexico it's not so expensive for students.
Actually, pues it's free. This university is free.
¿Qué cosa?
Que no, bueno, para los de posgrado es caro, en teoría, pero un alumno de licenciatura paga 500 pesos.
Yeah, but there are people that can't pay that either. We have to know that.
Yes.
Yeah, but one tuition for normal, the cost of the tuition for a student in the University of Guadalajara, that study has been made, is about 80,000 pesos semester per student. And they pay 500 pesos for 500.
500 pesos.
So it's nothing. But for the postgraduate, they charge, but they charge only in the University of Guadalajara.
Okay, these are all separate statistics, so let's not take them into account. And we're not talking about the charges because that would belong to economics. Okay.
I
Yeah.
just wanted to make a point that it's university, it's a master's degree and a doctorate, it's just put together.
Yeah.
Post-basic
Okay,
education.
okay, so postgraduate.
Sí, pero también lo que ustedes pagan por un semestre de posgrado, yo pagaba eso por una materia en el ITESO.
Okay, so it belongs to excitement. So just this one statistic that the education is 34% in the river basin area, and for Jalisco province it's 32%, so they're almost the same. Okay, so it's not something that stands out compared to Jalisco, but it's still significant that it's 34%, right? So when we're talking about postgraduate education, this is something honestly, you don't want 100% of the population to get postgraduate education. Because then nobody is going to plant potatoes, no one is going to get any work done. We don't want a whole bunch of people that are in their heads thinking about things, doing exciting projects. It's not healthy for the society either, really. So it's good for there to be a percentage of people that have postgraduate education, but you don't want 100% of the people to have it. Because as I said, you won't have anybody planting potatoes, growing crops, mending the roads, and so on. Or if they do, then they'll be very disheartened because they got a doctorate in medicine and they're making the road better. You know, so you don't 100% to make that to be the whole length. That doesn't make sense. You know? So 34% is not coming. So 34% is not a bad percentage. Yeah, because again, we don't want 100%. What would we want? What would be good for society to function well? Which percentage of people getting higher education, master's or doctorate? What do you think?
In Mexico,
Yeah, or just generally in a society.
probably 8%.
De personas que vayan a la universidad.
Que estén haciendo una maestría o un doctorado en México. ¿Cuánto creen que es el porcentaje?
¿A cuál es o cuál debería de ser?
O sea, ¿cuánto es? ¿Un 8%?
No, pues las personas que asisten son en la región 30 y tantos %, ¿no? Igual en Jalisco. Pero ella pregunta en una sociedad, pues, ¿cuánto debería ser, no? Y estamos pensando que...
I'm asking the question of what is the maximum that you would want? What is the minimum? So I'm trying to work out the length of this arrow. What is normal? What is maximum? What is minimum? You don't want the maximum to be 100%. That's crazy.
It's impossible.
10%.
Yeah, 10% to get masters and PhD. That's perfectly okay. But is that the maximum? Okay, but now we've an overshoot because we have 32%. 34%. So we have way too many people getting masters and doctorate.
University, there's some confusion because postgraduate
Yeah.
combines people that are in university, undergrads and grads. Exactly. People who has studied or are studying with master's degree and have doctorate.
Yes.
Yeah, PhD.
Yes.
But she refers only to undergrads and beyond, right?
Exactly.
So that you have a university career and master's.
Or has a master. or
Okay,
has
so I had
a-
misunderstood. I thought it was just masters and.
No,
and
it's university.
all university.
Yeah.
Okay,
University and all the rest.
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So well, that is a university degree, right? And a doctorate is a university degree, a postdoctorate is a university degree, a master's is a university degree, a bachelor's is a university degree. They're all university degrees.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, again, we don't want 100% of the population to have a university degree. And I think you were thinking in terms of really master's and doctorate. What would be the maximum that you would want for society to be doing well in general, for them to have some sort of university degree? Again, it would not be 100%, because otherwise nobody is going to be doing, university degree is a special thing. It's not for everybody. Some people are very good plumbers. Some people are very good at electricity. Some people are very good mothers. The mother doesn't need to have a PhD in sociology to be a good mother. And you need mothers, otherwise you're not going to have a society functioning. And you need good mothers, otherwise the society is not so good. And the PhD is not always a good mother. So we don't want 100% of the population to have university degrees. So what percentage, just think about it. What percentage of the society is a good, healthy percentage, a maximum that you would want for the society to be doing? 50%? 50? 50?
Yeah.
It's a lot.
That's a lot.
I think 20 or 22%.
For example,
It's the 15.
Ah, you say 15.
15, okay, so we've got 15, you have around 30%.
so,
15, okay, yeah.
I'm thinking in
Like
terms
zero.
do we have to think in terms of functionality? Or people who are just want to get educated at university? Because I'm thinking, well, maybe that farmer or that mother, well, not necessarily want to be functional,
Yeah.
but want an education.
Yeah, that's why I'm putting it all together.
So I would say even more, because if people want to go to university, even though they don't practice.
We're not talking about access to university.
So
We're talking about people that get university degree.
And,
Whether they use it or not, separate question.
okay,
Just have that level of education.
yeah, so I'm thinking maybe, yeah,
El
halfway.
30%
So we've got,
no
we
way.
have everything from 12, okay.
Yes,
Okay, so we have everything from 12%, 15%, 50%, okay? People have different conceptions. Some people think that half the population, 1 in 2 people, should have a university degree. That's very high. That's very high, all right? Because it's quite an extraordinary thing to have a university degree, and maybe it's not what society needs to function well as a society, unless the society is all doing very high-tech stuff and is all, or you might think of university education as a basic right of everybody.
Yeah.
And everyone should have this extra time to be learning at a very high level. So that's more speaking to the 50% people. But that lots of people, it's so much fun at university. And you learn so much at university that lots of people should have this, because then the whole society comes up.
If we think in terms of functionality, like economy, I think it will be, I think the percentage that we have here is, it will be a good percentage, almost 40% in terms of practice what you're learning in university. But as a human right, I would say even more than 50. Everybody should have the right if they want to.
No, we're not talking about the rights.
The right.
We're
It's
not talking about that.
another-
That's another issue.
So, yeah.
And also economic access or feasibility, time access. You know, because even if you can afford to come, maybe you don't have the time. So these are separate statistics, separate issues. We're just talking about they get an university education. So keeping the statistics separate from each other is also very important. Because they each mean something different. And that's what we're exploring with the compass. What does the statistic mean? And each one tells us a different story. So whether people have the possibility, the formal possibility, legally they can go, or economically it's okay, or whether they have the real possibility to go, they can really afford to go to the university. These are, these are all separate statistics. They each tell us a different story, that they're separate. Don't put them all together. Don't put three together, because then we become confused. Yeah.
I think that's the difficult side of the method. Sometimes
Yes.
kind of to discriminate everything.
That's right.
And make our statement the most
That's right.
clear and precise.
That's right. This is a philosophical exercise.
Yeah.
So that's exactly right. But otherwise, the meaning becomes a mixed meaning.
Yeah. But that's the way we are used to think, right? Like
I know, we're
systemic
very
way.
sloppy thinking.
Yeah.
I'm asking you to be very precise, and this is what is important in science, especially in social science. And social scientists are given less credibility in science in general compared to physicists, because the thinking is not very precise. I'm asking you to be very precise. In order to give more credibility to what you say. And those discriminations will be important when you justify policy. Because you might make a policy to make the university more inclusive, but you ask why? In order to give for functionality reasons, for just general well-being reasons. But even if I become a farmer, if I have a higher degree, maybe my life is just richer anyways, and it's a good in and of itself. Or maybe it helps the economy. And then I would want to track that statistic, my helping university people, helps with the economy. If it doesn't, stop that policy, it's not working, right? So So again, when you're justifying policy, you need to be very precise about how you're justifying it. And you're not going to be precise if you just say, well, university degree, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Good how? Good for what? And unless you are precise about these statistics, they're not very useful. So yes, it's hard. I agree it's hard. It really makes, you've got to really, really think, what am I talking about? What is the meaning? And we really are talking about meaning. What is the significance of each of these statistics? And then if we say, hold on, you've missed a meaning. you're only talking about functionality, or you're only talking about whether the people can get the right sort of jobs, yeah, then you're missing something. So we make another statistic about general well-being. Indirectly, if the farmer is very well educated, has certain tools, he or she, the farmer, will have a richer life and be able to participate in a different way in making decisions in the community.
Right. The same with the indigenous people there.
Exactly.
Now that they have access to university,
Exactly, and they learn how to speak to the people that, to the academics. They learn to speak to other people. And so it's not directly that they get more money for it. It's not, you can't measure it very directly, but indirectly it will have a wider good. But these are different values. And that's why they have to be separated. One is the value of contributing to the economy. One is the value of making society just function normally, whatever that means. One is a value of it's an intrinsic good. Intrinsically, those people who want to have such an education should have such an education. And that's a good in and of itself, because education is a good. That's an intrinsic quality. And that's why it has to be separated from, we want to give people a university education so that they can participate in the economics of the region. That's a separate thing. And we should not put them all together, because then we get confused. So we're just talking about the people who get, now we are talking about it all confused, because we're talking about the number of people who have higher education. And we've learned that maybe we want to split the statistic up into separate pieces. But we don't have the time to do that today. So I want you to think, again, in a sort of cloudy way, about university education. And the percentage was around 34%.
We're talking about the human capital.
About?
Human capital. Okay.
Right, human capital. Now, we might think of that in two different ways. One is as potential that can be used for the economy, right? And another one is potential for the society to work well. So capital is something that we use. That's different from an intrinsic good. So an intrinsic good would be something like if Joanne gets a PhD in, I don't know, biophysics and never uses it, never utters a word about this, never publishes anything except for what she needed to do for her PhD. She never talks to her children about it, nothing happens, but it's still a good thing. That would be an intrinsic good. So, because it just helps her as a person. But in terms of capital is something we can exploit.
¿Nos escucha bien?
Or that is exploited by the society, or it's exploited for economic reasons. So that's why we separate these things out. And getting these ideas clear in our heads makes us clearer thinkers and helps us with a very precise, deep justification for policy. And then we also know, who are we talking to? Are we talking to someone with which values? Are they thinking only in terms of economic values? Then to tell them, oh, it's important for Joanne to have the possibility to get a PhD in biophysics, even though she will never use it. The economics person can say, no, that's not important. Someone who's interested in society, in social things, is going to say, no, that doesn't help society. She's not passing on the information to anybody. She's not using the information for anything. She's not spreading the information. So it's not helpful to society. So who are we talking to? Who are we communicating with? Also becomes important. And that's why we separate the statistics out. in order to know which ones to use to communicate, to propose a project. When we talk about trade-offs, right? What can this person do, or this institution, or this group of people do to help bring the compass to the wish spot? Well, it depends who they are, right? What are their concerns? What are their values? So again, right now we still have to decide on length and angle for this one statistic. So I'll bring you back to our compass problem. So we have this population of 18 years and above with some sort of university education. That is undergraduate, master's, PhD, postdoc. So any sort of university education. In the Basin and Jalisco province, it's around the same as 34%, 32%, same thing. It's an excitement because we think of university education as a privilege, as something that is extraordinary, as something that's a positive thing. Now, in terms of length, we have the number 34%, and there was a lot of difference in this group of people, whether that was normal, whether that was kind of high, or whether that was sort of low. Some people thought maybe it should be around 50% of the population. Some people more around 10 or 12% of the population. So let's just compromise between those two, between 12% and 50%. We have 34%, which is a little bit high, right? So it would be more than halfway in the length of the arrow. So maybe it's 0.6. Does everyone understand how I got there? No, so I'll go again. So in this room, amongst these people, we have the opinion, the view that maybe 50% of the population should get university education. At the other extreme, we have maybe 12% of the population should get education, university education. So those are our extremes. So we have, this is our y-axis, right? We have between 12 and we have 50. The actual number is 34%. So between 12 and 50, 34 is around here, right? So what is this? Forget the 12 and the 50. What is this in terms of length? It's around 0.6, 0.7, 0.65. Okay. So that's how I came up with that number. So that's 0.65. And now let's discuss the angle. Okay, so we're in excitement. We're talking about university education. We're talking between 240 degrees and 360 degrees. The halfway point is 300 degrees. So if it's just purely exciting, it's not towards harmony, it's not towards discipline, it's just exciting, then it would be around 300 degrees. If it's sort of chaotic and fluctuating and risky and maybe a bit frightening, then it would be between 300 and 240. If it's something that is reassuring, that is healthy, that is exciting, in a good sense, it's exciting, stimulating, it's exciting, empowering, it's exciting, I don't know what other words to use. Exciting.
It mobilizes society.
That's right. It moves. It's moving society, but towards harmony, as opposed to towards chaos. Right. It's not disturbing society, but it's making society function better. So then it would be between 300 and 360. So let's just decide on, should it be in here or should it be in here? And then we'll narrow it down. So let's vote. So this is a protocol, right? Let's vote. How many people think it should be between 240 and 300? So university education. We get 0 votes. How many should be between 300 and 360? 1, 2, 3. We have lots of abstentions. Why are you abstaining? Why are you not voting? Do you have questions?
Well, no, I think we should go towards 300 and 360.
Okay, so we have one more, but there's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who have not voted, if not more. 6, 7. Salvador, you must have an opinion.
No, I'm not voting.
You're not voting?
She's like Switzerland.
I guess I'm very bad because I say to harmony, but now maybe to discipline because I lost my job. So then it's not good for me.
So, but a university education, does that mean that you lose your job?
In my case, yes, but it's not in my way to think, but it's exactly what happened that happened.
Or was it a university job that you lost or another job?
When I getting the PhD,
Yeah.
I lost my job. So then my expectation was
Right,
positive, and
good.
what happened was terrible.
Yeah. So what you did was you took a high risk.
Yeah, it's a risk, but
Right.
finally I still see like a excitement to harmony. I know.
Right. Right. So we want to know if that's representative. Now, if in the society in general, if for many people they're taking a big risk by going to university because they lose their job and there's no chance or they don't know what the chance is of getting a job afterwards, then that's very frightening. And then you're right, it belongs between 300 and 240. So I don't know if that's representative or not. And I mean, normally we think that if you have a university education, the probability of getting a job is higher and of getting a better job is higher. You might not get a very good job still. You might get a job that's not representing your education. But nevertheless, you should be able to get some job. But maybe not, maybe because there's a problem now in many societies, you become overqualified. And they say, sorry, you're too educated, we don't want you.
That's what happens here in Mexico.
Oh my God, I mean, that's horrible. And then what are you supposed to do? I'm going to become really dumb. You know, I'm sorry, I forgot all my education. Can I get a job now, please? You know, I mean, I burned my books, you know. I don't know what one does about that. But that's a problem. And if that's a real problem, then that would be a separate statistic, right? How many people get jobs after their university education? How many people get jobs that exploit their education? How many people get jobs that are way beneath their education? And those are important.
I really believe that it is more to harmony. I really think.
Yeah, so we're just thinking about having a university education as part of the society. And in general, it should be towards harmony. That's right. Okay, yeah.
Well, I think this is the public education, general education as a tool or instrument for scaling your social position. That has been proven. I mean, there's no question there, like,
Right.
education in general for most people is a.
Okay, but we're only talking about university education.
Yeah, that,
And as I said, I don't think we want 100% university education.
but that's the point, that's what I'm going to, like, in now in the Mexican context, in the new, for example, I'm just bringing this as an example, which I don't agree at also, but the idea is that everybody should be, that every student that applies to the university, everyone should have a place in the university.
Okay, that's separate too. Because 100%, when I mean that, I mean everybody gets a university education. That means even if I really don't want a university education, I'm going to be forced to go to university. They're going to check whether I'm there. They're going to check whether I've done my homework, and I have to pass. That's 100% university education.
Yeah, that's not the case.
Nobody wants that.
Yeah,
No society wants, even the Swiss do not want that.
Exactly.
Okay, so then there's a question of access. And whether or not people who are not really qualified to get university education, whether they should have access to this. And whether they should have access in what way. That's a very separate question. So again, and those are all separate statistics, right? And they're very important.
But my point is that when you have a public policy from the state, and you say, I don't know how it's in Canada or in Europe, but for example, the case of COVID showed very clearly we have talked about this, about the idea of efficiency as a lack of flexibility to address social problems.
Right.
So when what happened in Mexico in the last 30 years, for example, the schools of medicine, just they have enough doctors to deal with some diseases because the other diseases are very rare.
Yeah.
Or not, they're not market oriented. So
Right.
suddenly we have this pandemic and there are no doctors for,
Okay.
so how do you deal with that? The
Right.
response of the public policy is what I'm
Right, but that has to do with public policy in medical education. And it has to do with a particular type of problem. The distribution of different diseases in the population and also projection about different kinds of diseases in the population. Those are very specific policies. They're not policies about, because we're just talking about a very general statistic about a very vague measure about what population not should get a medical training in this particular disease, or general medical training, or medical training in rare diseases, or medical training in very popular diseases, to use a funny term. So that's how we narrow things down. And for each of those, you want separate statistics and separate ideas. So each of those would be a separate, if we're critiquing policy about only admitting X number of students to study medicine, for example, we would not criticize it in terms of, we think that 30% of the population should have a university education. That makes no sense. This statistic will have nothing to do, well, I mean, it barely has anything to do with it. We would have to look into, what do we mean by the health of the population? What do we mean by having access to medicine? Because it's one thing to say, I can go to my doctor, but the doctor's not qualified to deal with my disease because it's a rare disease. Those are very separate issues, and we need statistics on those things. We can't deal with those saying, oh, but 30% of the population has a university education. That doesn't solve the problem at all. It's got nothing to do with it. So these are separate issues.
That my point was not to put that as a rule, but as it's an example of the public education system in general, all the degrees and all the specialties. Like how the public policy addresses the problems that society has in any field, not only medicine. So we see it here in CUSEA. Like CUSEA, you guys are from Iris. in here, right?
Yes.
Environmental
Management.
management. And so how many students we have, say 30, 40 students in your generation?
Yes, like 30.
Okay, how many do you have in your generation of economics?
In mine,
Uh-huh.
15.
Okay, how many do we have in business administration or international business? Like
No,
500?
500 or
Yes, that's
600.
like right
Sí.
now.
See, so this type of quality analysis is very
Right.
rich in the,
Exactly.
in the,
Exactly. Exactly. And it will draw out these questions about distribution.
Mhm.
And what is and also the very important question, what is university education for?
Exactly.
Again, is it for functioning? Is it so that people can get jobs in what they're trained to do? Is it sort of more, is it to contribute to the economy, period? Is it for general functioning? Is it more nebulous than that? That when people are well educated, they participate better in society. So it's not just their job, but outside their job, they contribute to society. Or even more radical, is it a good in and of itself, regardless of whether the person participates in society? So Joanne, my biophysicist, lives an isolated life, doesn't reproduce, has no children, does not get married, lives all alone in a cabin in the woods, right? and just sort of sits there and doesn't share her information. Is it still a good thing? Then it's an intrinsic good. So the question that we're asking, what is being drawn out, is the question of what is it at university education for? And it might be for many reasons, but it's still called university education. And these are and we might say, look, the number of Joannes that live in a cabin, have a PhD in biophysics, that's very small. We don't need to worry about that. And they're not disrupting society. They're not disrupting the economy. They're just not on the horizon. They live in their cabin. So forget about it. Doesn't matter. They can enjoy their intrinsic good. All right. So they sit there, they're enlightened, they're having their thing, but it's not affecting anybody else. I don't care about them. They don't care about, no one else cares. They sit there. But in terms of whether the economy is more important than society, whether we think of society in terms of jobs that have to do with exactly what your education is about, or whether we think of society in a more general sense, that people participate democratically with each other, they make decisions together. So education in a wider sense, whether university education helps with that or makes it worse, right? Because sometimes a university professor goes to the municipal council meeting, right? And says, yes, but I am a university professor. Therefore, I know better than all of you how to analyze the situation. That's not very democratic. It's not very good. So sometimes the university education doesn't help with the wider group of people. Sometimes it's the person who doesn't have a university education who says very wisely to the group of people, I think that we should reconsider and think about our roots and who we are and what is important in our society, and not what the textbook tells us is important in the society. So university education can go both ways. Yeah.
So for terms of the methodology, to make it less fussy, let's say these same data, let's start with in terms of,
Good.
there will
Yes.
be to avoid confusion, right?
Yes.
Just in the table, put it that way.
Exactly. So we might break up the statistics. So we have the general statistic, but we might have specific ones. Medical education. Yeah. Distribution of medical education. Distribution generally. We have all these managers and we have 15 people in applied economics.
Mhm.
We have 30 people doing environmental management. We have, and
Hasta para hacer la fiesta de
is that a
graduación fue una
good
bronca.
distribution, So So that's a question of distribution. And we might put in the statistics about distribution. And again, whether this distribution is good or bad depends on what we think university education is about, what it's for. How do we measure whether or not it has served us well?
Do we get insight on how to measure that second aspect that you were talking about education?
Well, right. And so some of the measurements will be easy. I get an education in environmental science, and I get a job checking, the number of bird species in this forest. Great. Then I get a job that corresponds to my education.
Well, that's easy to measure.
That's an easy measure.
Right. But the other one is not so easy.
It's not so easy. So this is something that you will only get indirect measurements. You will get those through, is the society, what happens when a group of people meet and they discuss and they try to decide on something? Does this happen easily and harmoniously? Does it happen with conflict? In which case, that's not the point of education, is to sort of smooth things. Does it happen that there's a lot of tensions, but they get resolved quietly? Or are they resolved by somebody forcing somebody else? Forcing would show that the education is not working. You see, but then we go into the security things. So there was a town hall meeting, a municipal meeting. All the groups of people got together, and 5 people had broken legs, 2 people had broken noses, so and so, and so was shot. Okay, that was a bad meeting. Right? A good meeting is when they all decided together that this is where they want to go, and then they understand what's going on. So that shows that and then you ask how many people had university education. 30%, 2%, 100%, yeah.
Yeah, but they put me to this. That's very interesting. I think this is very important for the compass, because see the way the education is not only, as you just said, it's not only higher education is not only to prepare you to deal with the issues that are in your field.
Yeah, exactly.
So a university, full-blown university person has this way of behaving and looking at things.
That's right.
See, that's why I think that the COVID crisis that we live in is the proof of the failure of the university system in Mexico, at least. Because you see, the main discussion, when you talk to people that don't believe in science, it's like a social experiment. What's happening now is if science prevails, if people that are prepared to understand science thinking and to understand what a virus is and this medical thing. See, the reluctant people are the other side, people that don't. It's not because they are ignorant of the virus. It's because they don't have in their system the way to understand nature and society. So this role of how do you get to that in the compass? How do you explain? How do you picture that in the results of the proportion and direction of the arrows?
Right. So, and it will have to do with the numbers, right? How many people are resistant to the science? How many people simply don't understand the science? Now that might have to do with the representation of the science and the explanation in the media. So it might be a failing also on the university or the scientist's point of view, that they are not explaining very well. They're not communicating very well. So, I'm not sure. And this will have to do with details. And the details, that's why we need the numbers. That's why numbers, because you might say, oh, well, it has to do with this one university, this one newspaper article didn't explain something very well. That's one article that 3 people read. That can't be the reason, so that's why we need numbers, and sometimes we need to go really into depth with dividing the statistic up into many places. But let's now return to, sorry, being back to focus, back to relevance. We still have to decide on the angle for this thing. So what we have is, so far we decided that, so let me repeat the statistic. Population 18 years and above with university education in the basin is 34%, and in the state,
It's what, 80%? What?
34.
So 34 of the population over 18
Have a degree.
in outside.
University education. And 32% in the state. So that's quite high. It's quite good. And we
Very
just,
high now.
yeah. So we did, but we decided on the length. We've got the length. What we're deciding on now is the quality of this.
Okay.
And we've decided that it belongs somewhere, we narrowed it down from 240 to 360. We decided that it's really between 300 and 360 because it's just a sort of good thing in and of itself, even though it might involve a lot of personal risk. So that's something we have to find out more details about how representative that is. But now we're between 300 and 360. It will be closer towards harmony if this university education just helps society to go along normally. It's good, it's extraordinary, but the university educated people in the society, that 34%, 32%, help the society just to function in a proper way, in a normal way, help society to advance, or whether they bring a certain amount of risk. Is it something that's very extraordinary, exotic? Maybe they don't interact with the rest of society very much. They stay isolated, right? So they sit there, they talk to each other, they do FaceTime with each other, and they never talk to the shopkeeper. They don't talk to the cleaner. They don't talk to the teacher who teaches the primary school. You know, how much is that education? Is that reaching the rest of the population? Is it sitting very isolated? I don't know. I'm asking you to guess because I don't know enough. So you tell me what you think. If it's very sort of isolated and the group helps each other, but doesn't help the rest of society, it's going to be closer to 300. If this education is diffused more in the society, it's closer to harmony.
But if you have, for example, in the United States,
Mhm.
let's not talk about United States, but the States, the society is divided into half and a half. Half of the population think that Obama is a lizard and that they eat, and the politicians eat kids,
Right.
and that COVID is an invention of Bill Gates and these kind of things, right?
Okay.
Half of the population, and then you have the other half population. But the other thing, something like the academic dogma, right? So, if you say that, it means that you don't understand what science is, because precisely the science is there, not the dogma, right? But that's another discussion. My point here is that this other half of the population more or less believe in science or have this understanding of what a progression is, or what, they see a paper graph and they understand. Okay, but it doesn't match with university studies. Like some of the folks that are on this side are the PhDs, right? And some of the guys here that are more science oriented, they have no education. They are workers that support, policies of employment stuff. So where do you put the arrow?
That's what I'm asking you. So because we're doing a compass about the river basin area, not about the United States, the education system in the US is not functioning very well for that and many other reasons. turn the camera off for that. I don't want my department in the US to know.
In Washington.
I'm going back there. But
You can blackmail doctor.
yeah, no, you don't. So maybe, I don't know if it's the same in Mexico or not. I really don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm
What do you
asking you. Do people in university, do
¿Qué piensas?
they interact a lot with other people? Or is it very much closed circle? They live in a certain area, they only talk to each other?
The academia.
Ese es el punto. Sí, pareciera ser el inglés promovido, pero justamente ese es el punto. O sea, lo que yo les decía ayer hace rato es que lo ideal es que todos tengan el acceso a la educación.
Sí.
Sin embargo, no es lo real, ¿no? Y que así mismo la gente pueda aspirar a tener siquiera un doctorado o 20 o lo que quiera, y volver a los trabajos de oficio o volver al trabajo de campo, que sea igual de difícil como tener la educación, pero tener la probabilidad de decidirlo.
Okay.
Es que, ¿sabes qué? Perdón. Yo considero que mucha gente que tiene títulos universitarios se vuelve muy clasista.
Sí,
Sienten que son como títulos nobiliarios, ¿no? De, es que yo soy el licenciado y yo soy el maestro, el doctor y yo no me junto con la perrada, ¿no? O sea,
pero eso es un tema de idiosincrasia, y
sí.
también eso se promueve justamente en la educación. Entonces, justo con eso también lo que se debe promover es que no, que se rompan los estereotipos, que se rompan los sistemas y que los jóvenes trabajen activamente y sinceramente, justo lo que estábamos hablando ayer, ¿no? El activismo académico, que trabajen de verdad de fondo con la gente de las comunidades, con la gente del campo, con la gente de las periferias, con la gente que está en situaciones paupérrimas y demás, ¿no? Entonces, digo, yo lo he hecho de mi haber profesional desde hace casi 20 años que egresé. Sin embargo, lo cierto es que no toda la gente lo hace, que el sistema mismo no lo promueve, ¿no?
El sistema, desgraciadamente, mira, voy a comentarlo. Mi visión personal es de que las universidades, sobre todo las públicas, tienen que ser, tienen que resolver los problemas de tienen que resolver los problemas del país, ¿no? Por algo las tenemos que financiar. Pero desgraciadamente, y coincido con lo que últimamente está haciendo el presidente de la República, se han vuelto neoliberales. Yo cuando empecé a estudiar la carrera aquí, específicamente en el CUSEA, pues nos dieron una visión bien neoliberal, ¿no? De que tú estás estudiando por tu beneficio, por ti, tú tienes que progresar, tú tienes que subir a como sea, no importa quién plastes, ¿no? Hasta la fecha, o sea, no debe de ser así en las universidades públicas, tenemos que resolver los problemas de la gente, ¿no?
Claro.
Sí.
No, las ciudades sí se pero tú estás pagando por tu educación tú. Entonces, tú decides, pero si es una universidad pública, no, que dinero del mundo.
No importa que tú estés pagando por esa educación, tú tienes que dejar algo tangible a la sociedad en todos los sentidos. Entonces, digo, el tema de la educación es bastante amplio, es bastante complejo. Y más en México, sí. La verdad es que nuestra realidad no es la realidad de muchos otros países y mucho más la realidad de los pueblos latinoamericanos.
Y hay una animadversión también, una fobia al conocimiento y a la ciencia ahorita en la sociedad.
Pues hay gente
O sea,
que
tú
tiene
te
grados
paras en un
universitarios y es
lugar
muy
y you
ignorante.
stand up in a place and you say, it's now, it became something like almost bad that you say that you're an academic. Because then people think that you are elitist, that you are not connected with science, with society, that you are linked with the powers and you're an evil person. You know, it happens to me all the time when I try to say, well, it's not my fault that I'm an academic, right? But everybody,
Okay.
So the problem with public, I just want to finish because the problem with public education that I see it for the orientation of that is that we have to decide what are the arguments in which we would think that it should go more to what we should be, or it should stay as an alienation factor for the society. Is that right?
We're not interested in what it should be. We're interested in what the reality is.
Yes. Okay.
Now, as that reality changes, we will see the arrow change.
Okay.
You see, so we might say right now the education is not the university education is not doing well because people are being elitist, in which case it should be between 300 and
Yeah, that's right. That's what I was
Okay,
saying.
so from the discussion that happened just now, I've changed my mind. It should really be down here,
Exactly, exactly,
right?
exactly.
Okay.
That was, it didn't sound very coherent when you
Okay.
explained it the first time, because I thought it was more like.
Right, okay, so it should be more down here, and we track reality. Now, as the education, the distribution maybe, as we have more people studying ecological economics, for example, then it will move this more this way, but slowly. So the particular statistic can rotate, right? It can move over time, but we want the reality now, because we want policy to address what's going on now, not what we would like in the future or what we ideally presuppose. So it sounds as though it should be now between 300 and 240. Yeah.
Professor, as we have found so many point of view, shouldn't be like just in the middle?
That's a possibility too, because we've now heard a lot of different points of view.
Where it is. To leave it where it is right now.
Well, it's not anywhere yet.
It's not that one
We are
I can see it.
than this,
This is just marking the point, the halfway point.
but we don't have decided.
We haven't decided anything yet.
there. Okay.
We're
So I
still
would
working
say-
on the angle. This is 200, this is the possibilities. It's between 240 and 360.
Okay.
This is the area of excitement. We decided it was in excitement. Now, it sounded as though, at one point, it sounded as though it's fairly close to 300,
That's what I meant.
but on this side.
Okay.
But then we're talking about university people who are elitist, who come in, and say, or the perception of non-university people, and say, you're elitist, we don't want to talk to you. Then it should be down here somewhere. So maybe it should be, I don't know. And then we also have the opinion, careful, attention. We also have the opinion that because people are disagreeing, we should just put it right in the middle.
Just something exciting.
It's just exciting. So we don't know where it's going yet.
And the length,
We've already decided on the length. Let's not go back to length, please.
because I don't understand why,
One to five.
why you decide the length.
Okay.
Because when
Well,
we
let's decide on the angle, then I'll
Okay.
re-explain the length, okay?
Yeah.
Because we can't do both things at the same time. So the angle has to do with the quality, not the quantity.
Yes,
Okay, so the quality seems to, from the last discussion, it sounds as though the quality is really between 240 and 300. And there seems to be quite a lot of consensus about this. And that also speaks to the distribution, right? If there were more people studying social sciences, geography and things, maybe it would rotate more in this direction. And people who are studying, who are experts, they're doing, physics and nanoscience and weird chemistry and stuff. And, maybe they're all elite and they all sit somewhere here. They all talk to each other. They don't talk to anyone else. So I would put it, it sounds as though we should put it towards 300, under 300. So let's make it, I don't know, 290.
Okay.
Does that sound about right? And then I'll rediscuss length. Let me just write 290.
¿Sabe también cuál puede aplicar,
And
no?
these,
Desde
but,
las películas antiguas, la de
these-
Viento Negro.
These discussions
Que
are
el papá lo ve
important.
mal porque es
Now, what did we
ingeniero.
decide about length? The length was, we decided on 0.65. Because we decided that the actual number is 0.34% of people, or 0.32% of people actually get a university education. Okay, in this area.
we are comparing of the, the length of what we are comparing the number when we decide yes.
There are two numbers. One is the number of the angle that rotates around the circle.
Oh, yes.
This is a number. 240 is a
Yes,
number. 360 is a number. 300 is a number. These are numbers of angles. The number of the length has to do with what is the minimum, what is the maximum, what is normal. Normal is halfway. And that's the length of the arrow, how much of the radius of the circle.
But my question is why we decide the 50 because it's not a data, it's only what we think, but we don't compare with nothing. I guess it is
Where there was no 50.
yes, the 50
In the axis.
This, oh, this was extreme. We did decide on that.
Yes.
So the decision was what percentage of the population should get an education in university. We decided it would be very, very, very high. It's a kind of maximum. An absolute maximum would be 100%.
So it's different to the access of the university.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not talking about access to university. We're talking about actually get a university education. So if we talked about 100% of people in the river basin area get a university education, I mean, everybody must go to university. Even your grandmother has to go to university, get a university education. We force them to go to university. They have to attend, they have to get a degree. That's crazy. So making it 100% is crazy. You don't want to force everyone to get a university degree.
Okay.
They might die at 3 years old, they didn't get a university degree. Then that's a failing. Right? So that makes sense.
Okay.
So we decided that realistically, to get a university degree, 50% was maximum. And we could change this. We could change it on another, maybe 20 years in the future. We find that actually the basin area becomes high education area, a little bit like there's some area in California where people have a very high education. Okay. So but we decided that this would be a sort of maximum for the area and this would be a minimum. Okay. And then where does 34 sit between 50 and 12? So that's how we decided. So again, it's not the absolute numbers because we want to be sort of realistic. Again, because we want to help with policy decision making, not with how God would see how to do things or something. So as a policy maker, you want to think realistically, what do we want in the society? Do we want 100% of the society to have an education in university? No. We don't want 100. Now, access is a separate thing. And that's a political question. And there's a difference between they're allowed to go, they won't be stopped, whether we're going to make sure that they get their degree, so they will actually be followed through and they will get their degree. Another question. Third question, whether they really can go to university. Maybe they live too far away and they cannot afford to rent a place, even if the fees for the university is free. They cannot afford to live close enough to the university or buy the bus ticket to get to the university. It takes them 3 hours to get to university, 3 hours to get home. It's not working. So access, again, we want formal access, so they're not legally prevented or they're not financially prevented, but is it feasible for them? Do they have real access to university? So to make it real access, people who don't have the economic means should be given enough money to live decently, close to the university, afford the books, afford to have food, etc.
Or everybody that wants to study should be able to study.
Yes.
So the state should be able to provide the conditions for the people.
Right. Right.
Because that doesn't mean that everybody should study, but if
That's right. Because it's crazy to make everybody study.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone.
In University of Guadalajara, every of 10, we have every semester an exam for to enter the university. And 3 out of 10 enter.
Yeah.
The other 7, they don't have, but they want, they are there.
Yeah.
That's because they raise the standards. So if there are some societies that only 1 or every 20, like medicine, for example.
Yeah.
But in other, for example, it's open. Almost anybody could. So who decides where, how to?
Well, that's the distribution question, right? Because also, if 100% of people wanted to study environmental management, that would not be very good. That would be a bad education system, right? If 100% want to study medicine, it's a bad education system. This is not education. This is specialization. This is a technical school. So the question of distribution is a very political question. It's a cultural question. It has to do with what imbalances we find within society now, and if we think that is an imbalance or not. We might not see it as an imbalance. So those are very important political questions that we should discuss. And for a more complete compass, we would have to have all those discussions. That's right. And they're important and they're interesting. And that's also to let's close up now, I think, because we're at 1:30. So one of the 2 important things. One is that all of those discussions that were drawn out by discussing one data point, there are lots and lots of discussion. This tells us about what is the meaning of the data. We're discussing the meaning. Those stories are going to become important when we justify data and when we make policy. They have to do with our deep analysis of the policies, of our deep analysis of the data. So all of those stories are part of that data table, and they are important. The other thing that we learned is that it's sometimes we have tomorrow what I will do is I will discuss all of the lessons that we learned from this sort of analysis. But sometimes it's not easy. It's not easy to decide even which general category a data point belongs in. It's not easy, partly because we're not used to thinking in these terms. Those 3 qualities are not how we're educated. So it takes time to become used to them. That time makes it into a process. So when we use the compass to communicate with people, we cannot assume that they will immediately understand harmony, excitement, discipline. Got it, no problem. Now I categorize everything, I know how to see. It takes time to digest that information. That's why we did all of this exercise in data analysis, is to think of a data point in terms of the angle and in terms of the length. The length is how significant is it? How important is it? How strong is it? Maybe we had one data point where it was not very strong. It was just sitting there, 0.7% of the population. As a policymaker, should I worry about 0.7% of the population? No. There are other things that are much more important that you have to do. The only way to make that important is to say, look, that 7%, there's a lot of other things that are going on, and eventually that 7% actually does have a voice. You have to give it a voice. You don't give it a voice by saying 0.7% of the population has to use a bucket in order to bring water into the household. That's not enough information. You have to tell me that also these are people under the poverty line, that maybe it's a particular community of people who, for cultural reasons, we need to support because their community is dying off, their culture is dying off. I don't know. But you have to find more things than 0.7% have to carry a bucket once a day. So again, the importance has to do with the length. And the quality is something, it takes time to get used to thinking that way, a lot of time. And what we also discover is when we start to tell the stories, a lot of other statistics come out. We need to know about distribution of the education. We need to know about access to education versus have an education. We have to know about how that education is used. Is it used to say, oh, I have a degree. I'm not going to talk to you because you're insignificant. You don't have a degree. You don't get to talk to me. Is it for that? Or is it to help the community? Is it that I use my education to help other people to understand better what we're trying to do and learn from the community, you know, be humble as academics and not, I have my degree, I did all this work, therefore you shut up and listen to me. Instead, we can use it to moderate, to draw people out, to help them to communicate, to help them find their voice, to translate what they are saying so that other academics understand what they have to say. So, and those are the virtues of academia. So, and if the university system is failing, if it's between that 300 and 240, it's not doing very well. It's not doing as well as it should. It should be up there somewhere. So we would wish education to be around here, but it's really sitting around there. Oops. So how do we draw that arrow this way? We maybe change distribution. We maybe change access. We change. So for example, this project that we're going to do in the Santiago River Basin is to use the education to really help the communities, not to tell them blah, 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 we're going to improve the water quality, but to improve the water quality, to improve the health of people, to improve agriculture, to really do it. So then we bring that arrow more towards here. And that's government policy. So this justifies the government policy to say, we're only going to fund, we're going to give you money only if you really help the communities. And then we use the compass to check, are you really helping the communities? Or do we as academics go to the community and say, oh, you be quiet, we'll tell you what to do. You dig a well there, you put some piping here, and your problem is solved. Bye. Yeah. And nobody checks, did the well actually get dug? Was the piping put in? Did someone put the money in the pocket? And did it do what it was supposed to do? Did it help the community? No. So you make a water treatment plant, someone puts money in their pocket, they walk away, we have a water treatment plant, I tick the box, oh, problem solved. No, it's not solved. The water is still bad. So you invested, the money was put in, but it was not put in the right place. So that's when we say sorry, but it's not working. And we use the compass to track that. So now you become responsible as a policy maker. You say, I'm going to invest, but we're going to now check to make sure the investment pay off. Not in terms of, oh, did you get money back? But in terms of society and in terms of the environment as well. And we're going to keep track. Okay, I think that's enough for today. Next time, tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, Más o menos, I understand. 10 o'clock, I will present to you the compasses based on the tables. I will do the calculations at home. I will ask for your reactions. And we're going to look back at the data table and see what is missing, what sort of data would we want to add, why do we want to add it. So we look at this exercise. On Friday morning, what we do is we discuss where would we bring this forward, where would we go next. So we complete the exercise tomorrow. Finito with this particular, where I got you to do some work, find some data, do some data analysis. It's a toy, it's we don't have a complete table. We know that. What more would we need to make a good table? And then Friday, how do we use this stuff? How do we use the compass? How do we use it to communicate? How do we use it for policy? How do we use it for decision making? How do we use it for mediating between groups? How do we use it for trade-offs? It's kind of interesting to use it for trade-offs. How do we make policy recommendations? So how do we sort of use this thing? And where are we actually going to go forward with it? Because we're going to use it for the Santiago River Basin properly at some point. Okay, enough for today. Basta. Any questions? Sorry, I should have asked it for a question. Yes.
I am thinking about the three-dimensional
Yes.
in practice, for example.
Yes.
I'm thinking about the coordinator for the enterprise
Yes.
in a group,
Yeah.
a cluster,
Yes.
control cluster, because it's very important three-dimensional or control cluster. For example, discipline, harmony, and excitement.
Yes.
The three dimension is very important for the control cluster.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we might also want to think, where do we need the discipline? Where do we need the excitement? In what proportion? And when? So maybe we don't need excitement now. What we need is discipline now. So sometimes we use the compass to say, look, we're going to work very, very hard. We're going to sit in discipline for a while. But the reason for it is we're going to end up in excitement, or we're going to end up in harmony. And we can set a date. We can say in 3 months, 2 years. But if it doesn't move, we're going to say, why didn't it move? You told us that we had to tighten our belts. We had to be very austere. We had to work very, very hard. And you said it would get better. It's not better. So then it was a bad, I'm not going to vote for you anymore. Now, there's another complication, which is maybe there were outside things. COVID-19 happened. Everybody suffered, okay, except for people that make masks. So almost everyone. So everyone is in the same boat. We have to delay the expectation. Wait a little bit until we recover from COVID. Okay. So again, we use the compass to justify, and we say I thought that if we cut wages in the company for 2 years, that we would then recover and we would all start to make more money. 5% increase every year or so. We're investing in a new part of the industry in order to bring the money up. It doesn't work. After you promised it would work, it doesn't work. It was a bad decision. And that's it. So it's quite simple. Now you might say, the people might say, I don't have the patience. 2 years is too long. I won't wait that long. So then you say, okay, is there another way we can invest that will bring us a little bit more money but faster. You know, so you might test the decision making. You find a way. But these are very good questions, right? If you're in an industry, you want to ask the people around, can you manage for 2 years? No wage increase. You know, maybe not. Maybe they say no, we won't do it. And making those decisions collectively like that means it will. There's a feedback loop that it will be more successful because people understand, and then they're willing to work hard. They're willing to sacrifice for a short time because they believe that it will help. And when they're willing to sacrifice, they sacrifice more than if they don't understand why they have to do it. Because they're stuck, because they can't find another job. So when they understand, then they're willing to sacrifice. They're willing to work hard. So psychologically, there's that feedback loop that becomes important too.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
well, we have some organization issues. So Saturday, you go to the master. Friday, we need the resume of your dad for the president. Is asking.
Yeah.
Is he coming finally?
Yeah.
Is that Friday for the conference?
Yes.
Okay.
He's coming. I think today's the 24th, right?
26.
No, today.
Today is 23.
23.
Mhm.
Okay, so he comes tomorrow night, in the middle of the night, 12 at night.
Okay, so we're gonna get him to the hotel.
I gave him instructions. I said you go straight outside outside
Is it
arrivals.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a taxi thing. You give them the address, and I
Yeah,
told the
great.
people at the
As
hotel.
you know, you probably knows too, it's important to have an institutional taxi. the one
Yeah.
that-
No, I told him.
Okay, perfect.
No.
And so Friday, you're asking for the curriculum, for the resume, for the presentation, for the president to know about the data.
Right.
And so that's Friday. Saturday, we have the Mascal, you do
Fantastic. Look at that. Oh, fantastic. So good. Oh, super. Oh, good.
Entonces, en esas, poner también que firme la doctora, ¿no? Excepto con la de ella, obviamente, ¿no? Que hay que firme.
Le digo a Juan.
Sí. A ver si quiere ir.
Sí.
Yeah. Oh, okay, super. 2018.